So welcome back, everybody. We look forward to beginning the 12th chapter, which is the culminating chapter of Shar Yichud V'Emunah, this unique segment. The gateway into oneness and faith. We spoke about this myriads of times, emphasizing the title of the Alter Rebbe's presentation in these 12 chapters so uniquely and in a way which is unprecedented without a doubt, of the information. I'll just translate the word Shar Yichud V'Emunah, the Alter Rebbe opening up a gate of oneness and faith in a way that is, let me say, unprecedented. It's exactly the way that is what it truly is. The Alter Rebbe didn't just share information with us; he pulled us into that gate, to the state the way it's behind the veil of which ultimately produces a spirit in which the idea of oneness Hashem could be doubtful, chas v'chalila, which is Elam Hazeh. We have to seek and search and look for this reality. We find it primarily through learning Torah and doing Hashem's mitzvahs. B'chol masechel Hashem shamayim, b'chol derechecha da'eyu. It takes toil, but if it's just a matter of fact, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and we say it a few times a day. So why is it so hard to find? Because there is the veil. Why is it so hard to identify? The answer: because there is a veil, which is the tzimtzumim, the contractions, which we learn about, but ultimately Elam Hazeh appears, and again the emphasis is appears, because in the end of the day, this physical world, like Elam HaYetzira and Elam HaBriya and even Elam HaTzilus, from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the oneness is exactly the same. But Atzilus is Lo Yigur Chara, everything is about the spirit and the ambience of an atmosphere of Achdus Hashem, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But as the evolving of Eilamis, we spoke about this many times. In the end of the day, there is these tzimtzumim, which are again these concealment contractions, which conceal and obscure that reality of oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we still sit in Elam Hazeh, and this is the objective and goal, the emes Hashem la'olam, to reveal Ba'imahu Hashem Echad U'Shmei Echad, that oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even in this very physical world. And this is part of our proclamation and demonstration, but not only to others, to ourselves, meaning to say to ourselves, our families, societies, yeah, this is all real, because this is the truth, the inherent truth, which is in Elam Hazeh, just like in this physical world, like in the worlds on high. The only thing is, in this world we have to find it and see. And this is I did try to define this. We have to toil rather to identify the Hashem Echad. And the Alter Rebbe pulls us into the shar, into this behind the veil, and says, I'm going to show you the way Achdus Hashem is from on high. Hashem Hu Elikim. And when we come into this gate, it's something which is, it's not only, Alter Rebbe shares with us information, as we many times point this out, it's about a transformative experience. So this is the Shar Yichud V'Emunah. This is the culminating chapter. For that matter, if you recall, we began this 12th chapter last week. The only thing is a significant majority of the class, beyond that, I think that most of the class we just went into in a few words. We really explained, we took the time, maybe too much time, but I think looking back, I think it was important enough to explain what is the novelty of Perikut Beis. It's a unique chapter on its own, different in style. Unique meaning in this case it's different. It's in style than the previous chapters, but you can see the correlation. It's the same Alter Rebbe. We could just take a moment. We do see how this becomes ultimately the culminating chapter of the Shar Yichud V'Emunah. But it's interesting how the Alter Rebbe goes into so many details, which apparently, one would ask why to go into that degree and that manner of detail and articulation, which again we spoke about this and we answered, because that in the end of the day is the objective and goal of the Alter Rebbe, the way he wants you to come out of this unique study of Shar Yichud V'Emunah. So we took the time, we explained it, and as we usually mention, namely for the newcomers, you can find the last week's introduction to Perikut Beis and all the previous classes on the Tanya Online, one word, tanyaonline.com. Whichever you're watching it, the original site has the advantage, as we mentioned time and again. You have this scroll bar, the text on a separate scroll bar, as such, easy to follow, and all the other previous classes come up along the left side of the website. Also opens up in the very same fashion with the text on a separate scroll bar, as such, again, thus easy to follow. So we're going to go right into it, almost right into it. Perek Yud Beis, right? We're already a few minutes in this introduction, non-introduction, but let's go on. Perek Yud Beis. The creations are divided in their types in a general manner and in a detailed manner. Like the changes of the combination, the substitutions, and the different interchanges and different configurations which establish themselves based on the way the word which would ultimately, the name which will ultimately give life and existence and energy to this which is created. So the Alter Rebbe begins rak. What does it mean, rak? Rak means though or only, coming from the previous chapter. So the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe did already speak about the details of the nivroim, of the created beings. Vasar mamoris nivra ha'olam, as opposed to Azara Dvarim, which the Medrash brings, what Alter Rebbe brings in the previous chapter, before the Yud Aleph. In the 10th chapter, the Alter Rebbe speaks about Azara Dvarim Nivra Ha'olam B'chochma B'sfuna V'das, which is the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yud Aleph, he introduces the Asara Ma'amores, which bring really creation into actualization, execution of creation itself. And so apparently you're done. There's the creation. You have that Asar Mamoris with all the advantage of the Mamoris, even over the way the Olam stand within the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we explained this, we took the time to explain even this last few phrases in detail. And again, you could find in the very previous classes. So, but Alter Rebbe says, no, let's not stop there. Let's go into the nitty gritty of this creation, which was created by Asar Mamoris. Instead of just looking on those air, light, and water, which I mentioned in the 11th chapter, but let's go even into more detail. Which is, again, we mentioned last week why the Alter Rebbe did so, but the Alter Rebbe is saying over here that the creations are divided in their types, in general forms and in specific forms, based on the interchanges of the tzirufim, chilufim, utmuris, again, the combinations of the words, the substitutions of the words, and the configuration of the words. Because every letter carries within itself a life force, an energy, and a unique, particular energy. And when you take this letter, which carries a certain amount of energy, and you take another letter which carries another type of energy, and another letter, and it's combined to one word, so then you have a certain combination of energy which will ultimately create this particular creation with its style, flavor, image, character, and its whole makeup in exact that same fashion. So it's worthwhile probably to repeat this, which we mentioned again quite a few times, that the Lashon HaKodesh is unique in its as a language, different and so different and distinct than any other languages, while the other languages known to be called a Lashon Haskemi, which people established in order to be able to communicate, which is, again, there is chachma, wisdom, and even brilliance in the setup of languages, the sophistication of languages, the complexity of languages, but nonetheless, it's a schemi. There's nothing intrinsic in a chair that it should be called chair, as in a table to be called table. It could have been the other way around. And then we would know that the table is, bring me over a table, you would get a chair, and the same thing, put this on the chair, would be putting that on the table. That wouldn't really make a difference. Now, it's hard to imagine like that because we think about chair, it's so ingrained into us, a chair is a chair, and a table isn't a table in the English language. But it could have been different. It could have been the opposite. When it comes to Lashon HaKodesh, every word and every name is intrinsically connected to the item that the name is placed upon and called. For example, Eitz, a ilon, aleph, yud, lamed, nun, eitz, for example, pri eitz, or a peri, a fruit, or a pri adoma, or a something which is called as the famous medrash when it came to the animals. It says the medrash says that Adam Arishin, all the animals and beasts lined up in front of Adam Arishin. He said Lozeh no likra sheir, v'zeh no nikra chameir, and the Hashem presented this idea to the malachim and they couldn't get through it, and it was presented to Adam Arishin, and Adam Arishin just did it without any. He did it so smoothly. This is a sheir because Lozeh no likra sheir. The ox and the para and the chamayr and so on, and all the commentaries ask, like, what's the big deal? Malachim, angels, should have an issue to call the animals with a name. What was so unique about Adam Harishin, the first, again, Adam Harishin, to call these animals, to give these names to the animals? For that matter, it's simple not only for angels. You figure out certain names like it is in other languages. There's so many different names in a regular big city. People come up with names for every street and every town and you can come up with names. Is there chachma? Yeah, a little bit chachma there is. But why was it so unique, as we glean from the medrash, that even the malachim, the angels, couldn't come up with the right names, and Adam Harishin could have? And then what is this greatness attributed to Adam Harishin, that he came up with the names, how to call the animals? Answer, that because Adam Harishin knew that, and he figured it out again, he realized the energy, he was able to see and identify the energy which exists within the Aleph Bays, the 24 Aleph Bays, as we mentioned this last week. He understood, he appreciated the energy which is in, let's say, in a Shin, and in a Vav, and in a Reish, and he saw the combination. He said these three letters come together, and precisely the Vav before the Reish and the Shin before the Vav. And that energy is the energy which gives life and existence to that ox, and it gives the entire buildup of the ox. Its character, its style, its nature, everything, even its external image, is created because of that combination. And that is deep, naturally. That is profound. And that is why the Taita, the Medrash, says, well, that was Adam Harishin. He was able to identify the energy which exists within all the Isis, all the letters of the Aleph Base, and he can be able to combine it together. And as we mentioned last week, even the Shir, even he had the same letters, but if it would be, let's say, Rosh, which is Reish Vav Shin, yeah, the animal would not look like that ox, would never look like the ox the way it is. With its nature, with its robustness, and all the whole with this, what we identify and know about the ox, it would have been a different type of creation. Maybe it would be a living creation. Maybe it would have certain similarities to the share, the way we know the ox, the way we know it. For that matter, it's the same letters which carry that same energy, that one way or another, the same letters of the share, the way we know it, but in a different configuration, a different setup. As such, it would not result in the ox the way we know it. It would have been a different style of creation. And when Adam Harishin saw, in other words, Adam Harishin is not the one who established that shayr, that energy which created. To the contrary, Hashem already brought all those animals to Adam Harishin to give them their name. What Adam Harishin, he just revealed this. He said, Lozeh no likra sheir, which means Hashem created that ox with the Shin and the Vav and the Reish, and again, exactly in that setup. So he discovered, or he revealed, he said, yeah, Hashem already created this ox with that Shin Vav Reish, exactly in that order, and I'm going to tell you the name which Hashem used in order to create it, and the energy Hashem used, and combine it together and establish that exact configuration of the Shin Vav Reish. That's why the ox was created in this fashion, and therefore, Lozeh no likra sheir, and so to par, and so to chamer, and so on and so forth. And this is without Rebbe, because ultimately, every letter has a certain amount of energy. And when you combine many letters, leaves teva to establish itself as a word, and azay mavadri b'minikeches v'chayis and imshachem kifim mispar ha'esis shebeteva oizay sa'il al kolona amshachas kech elyin v'chayis klolis hakoileles ushkulo kineged kol mine hakoiches v'chayis protis shel ha'esis v'oile al gabehen. A lot read over here. but it's okay because it's just one idea with Alter Rebbe is introducing over here. That theoretically, let's say if you think about the letters as numbers, let's say you have, which it's true also, the sheen, the numerical value of sheen is 300, and then the vav is 6. So you have, and the reish is 200. So you have the shir, you have 506. So these, we do know also that the gematria, the numerical value, according to Torah, also has significance in the way the hashpah, the energy, comes down and is manifest in this particular type of creation. But let's just look at it, but it's understandably in the word share, there's so much more of the energy of each letter on its own, besides its numerical value. But let's just use that as the numerical value just to appreciate what Alter Rebbe is saying over here. Let's say you needed 506 types of energies, for example, which is the numerical value of shayr, in order to create the ox. So you have the shin vav reish. Let me ask you, is it relevant at that point the establishment of the word in that particular fashion? Not at all. Because you could have the reish before the vav and the vav before the shin. In the end of the day, you have the same numerical value of 600 and 506. And for example, does it have to be called? It doesn't, as such, it doesn't have to be called shayr. It doesn't have to be exactly like that. Theoretically, if you just focus on the numerical value, again, we're just using it, even the numerical value contributes to the actual creation. Alter Rebbe wrote in the very first chapter, but there's so much more to it, as we just mentioned, because every us has so much energy additional to the energy associated with its numerical value. But just let's keep it as an example to appreciate again what Alter Rebbe is saying here. So we have over here 506. Does it always? But it doesn't have to be in this fashion. And also, who says it has to be in one word? It doesn't have to combine in one word. Shin vav reish. It doesn't have to be called shayr. It's just a matter of the shin vav reish associated with this 506, which gives energy to the ox and establishes the ox, the image and the posture and the whole composure of the ox in that exact fashion. Why not? So comes the Alter Rebbe and says it's not only that. There's something unique about these letters coming together. And particularly in the exact fashion as they come together, like in this case, the vav before the reish and the shin before the vav, and namely they come together. And when they come together, the fact that these three different types of energies are coming together, you need a superior and superseding force, which is allowing it to come together. Because how do these distinct types of energies come together? Apparently, they are different, and again, they are distinct, not only, again, because of its numerical value, which also you have that distinction. There's something about the 300 and the 200 and the reish and the 6 and the 6 and the vav, but it's beyond that. Each letter has a particular energy, again, independent of its numerical value, or the energy associated with its numerical value. And that energy, for that matter, is far deeper, far more energetic, has so much more power. So how do they come together? Answer: there's the Alter Rebbe tells us there's a koyach ha'oila va'oila al koyach elyon mechayis klolis, which brings them together, and that's a superseding koyach. That's an additional koyach which brings these letters together, and that energy is perhaps even the primary energy, which is pumping that life force and vitality in this created being. How do we know that this is a greater energy, or contributes more even than the letters and the energy which exists in each one of the ICs, each one of these letters? Answer: because the fact that it could combine these multitude of energies, that shows that it has a superseding koyach. If it has a superseding energy, that tells us that in the end of the day, this enormous vitalizing force is presented right now in the combination. Let's stick to the same example of that shayr, that tells us that the energy of the shayr, the buildup of this creation, which would be the ox, receives perhaps more from this superseding force, more than even the Isis, more than even the energy which exists in every single letter on its own. So Shin carries an enormous energy. It's the Chabez Isis of the Lashon HaKodesh, the Lashon, the language Hashem used to create the world. We can't even imagine, we can't even describe how much energy there has to be in each one of the alphabet. Something which is really indescribable, because it's again the Lashon, the language Hashem used to create. This is the blueprint, this is the energy of creation. And if you look at creation, you see, wow, this is enormous, and this is so sophisticated, and so complex, and the sun is 167 times the size of the planet. Again, it's just the one creation of grandeur nature as an example, and it's so large and it's so big, and we can't even we didn't even scratch the surface of the even Elam Hazeh, this physical world, the way we know it. And then we said, look, wow, what was this? Where did this creation come from? We know, well, it came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What did Hashem use to create? He used these Chabezes, these 222 letters of the Aleph base. Really? So each one of these letters really have molecular atomic energy. Yeah, they do, because they created such a sophisticated world. And all the details and in every species, the thousands, the millions, and the billions which exist within every species, you see a certain enormity in this energy, but they're all in the Aleph base. This Sheen and this Vav and this Reish, there's an enormous amount of energy. And certainly they take part in creating or being the life force which creates that oxide exactly in its image, in its posture, in its character and style. But on top of that, there is even a greater superseding energy, the fact that this is an energy which can combine all this together and put it in one word. And again, we're not talking about writing the word Shin Vav Reish. We can all do that. It doesn't mean that much to us. In other words, we don't have to, because we're already dealing with these letters already, which already pre-exist. We're not really combining them into one. We're having to be writing them on a paper in sequence. But we're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu taking that enormous energy, which exists in every single one of those letters, and forcing them, bringing them together. That takes a superseding kayach, and that kayach is perhaps even a greater part of the development and creation of that share, of that ox. So let's say this is, and that's what Al Rebbe used the lashon oilal kolon amshech kech eli, in a superior, supreme kayach, which brings them all together, and he says, Vahu, and that kayach, and that energy, mechavros or mitzarfos and yachad, brings them, combines them together, lashpia kayach v'chayis la'ilam hanivra, to provide energy and life force to the world of this creation. Meaning to say, if you're talking about a share, the entire component of the share, the whole world of the share, its whole nature, and we look at an ox, we see so many details, and we focus also what the ox contributes to the development and the betterment of this planet. It plows, and it's able to do so much, and there's every, we can appreciate for that matter in so many of Hashem's creation, and this we can appreciate. We do know if HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, certainly it contributes to the bigger picture of the development of Elam Hazeh in a positive way on its own. So when we look at the world of the Sheir, the world of this Nivra, of this created being, which again, we're just sticking to that example of the ox, based on that Medrash, which is a good example. It has that has the backdrop of the Medrash. All domination says Lo zeh no likra sheir. So this is the premier energy, because this is what brought these letters together. To its klal, to its general appearance, and to its detail and specific appearance, to its specific nature, to its specific style. So the Alter Rebbe now is going to go on, for that matter, to give another example. We're using the word the sheir again based on this medrash which we introduced, but let's see what the example the Alter Rebbe is giving here. Kigoyin derech mashal, for example, b'tevis sheb'maimer yirakia, in the words Yehirakia, Hashem said, "Shall there be a firmament?" Shenivru b'hen zayin rikim. When Hashem said, "Shall there be a firmament?" And so we know what was created: 7 rikim. No, the 7 heavens, to the way it's translated. The 7 rikim, the 7 firmaments, and the heavenly army which exists within these 7 firmaments. In other words, it's not just 7. We know with the Echad, the Gemara says, for that matter, in this very pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Echad refers to the 7 heavens and the earth. 8, numerical value of 8, is the 7 heavens and the earth, the 7 firmaments and the earth, and the Dalet is the 4 quarters of the world. And the message of Hashem Echad is the Aleph, we introduce the Aleph, which is the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in all of creation, starting from the seven heavens, this very earth, and all corners of the world. This is part of the proclamation and demonstration of Hashem Echad. Not only that, what Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one, but it's in the word of Hashem. The whole entire message is embedded, encapsulated in that one word, Echad. Aleph is Alufi Shalayim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the Ches, which is the seven Rakim and Oretz, and then you have the Dalet, which is the four corners of the world. So when we speak about the Zayin Rakim, where did they come about? How did they come about? Because Hashem said, Yehi Rakia. Seven, in each one of the seven, there's an entire heavenly army. Literally translated. I mean to say, and the Gemara says what exists within each one of the Rekim, within each one of these heavens, these firmaments. So the Chazal tell us, for example, so in the one of the heavens there's the Shchakim. It's called Shchakim. In other words, the heaven itself is called Shchakim. Why? Shchakim has the connotation of grinding. That are there is the mills, the grinders, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu establishes a whole system and a whole development within that Rakia, which grinds manna for the righteous people. What's that supposed to mean? So let's step back over here. I do want to mention that before we'll go into the Alter Rebbe's, maybe we'll leave the part of this Bezoshem for this coming week because we usually don't learn the Haggah. As you recall, we have it posted on the website and anybody could look into it. But we usually just looked into the Tanya itself. And in this case, I think it's quite, if we could make a little change over here, that to learn this Haggah, because it gives additional perspective in this very chapter and in the whole idea how these 22 letters of the Alabase stand as a center force and ultimately the vitalizing force which ultimately creates all Elamis and ultimately this very physical world. So we're going to go into it in a moment, but let's just try to find a concluding point over here. Understand what does it mean that there is grinding mana for the tzaddikim? Like which tzaddikim are we talking about? And more so, the man was already 40 years. We had the man in the desert. That's where it began and that's where it ended. Even though famously it says in a number of places that Parnasa today by a Yid is similar to the manna in the Midbar. Not necessarily we can exactly figure out where it's coming from. In other words, when, just like the Am Yisrael in the desert, they got their manna, they got their share, and they didn't have them piled up in their pantries for the next day. As such, they had to kind of reinvigorate their faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to tomorrow bring that same manna. And every day they had to again identify that emunah, which is inherent in the Yid ultimately, but it's a new Aveda, even though it was one decade after another decade. But there's something comfortable when you know that you already have the bread in your pantry for the next day. In this case, it didn't exist. So every day the Am Yisrael had to extract their faith that they're going to go out to the field and they're going to find their manna in order to sustain themselves and their family, because that was the only food. There was no groceries or supermarkets around. Even certain stuff they could have bought. The Gemara says Tagri Umis, which they encountered in the way in the desert. But nonetheless, their daily sustenance came from the manna. So it says a number of places that even Parnasa today, we can't exactly figure out, even though we can have a plan, but as we all know, sometimes that precise plan doesn't work. A new plan comes into place, a plan where we didn't even imagine that we will be successful with that plan, and that comes to fruition and to actualization, as opposed to this that we strategized and we had it perfectly set up, just didn't work out, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was running the show, even in a setup today that our sustenance is not exactly in the framework of the manna, that we go outside to our backyards and find that our bread and the entire sustenance for ourselves, our families on a daily basis. But at the end of the day, Parnasa work is the same. It works out in the same way. So, in the Parnasa is also in a very similar fashion as the manna on the 40 days of the 40 years of the Am Yisrael in the desert. So the question really is, what are we talking about? What manna are we talking about? What tzaddikim are we talking about? Are we going back to the times is this associated with the desert? Was a firmament established just for the time of the manna in the desert? And for that matter, we know that the manna was not only for the tzaddikim, everybody received the manna because that's the way they sustain themselves. If it was everybody, including Dustin Vaviram, they were all there throughout, at least till the time they were there, they were receiving the same manna. They weren't known to be tzaddikim. So what does this mean? So understandably, we're not talking about the time of the desert. It means that if for that matter, it's a bit in the context that we said before, as it's written in a number of places, that Parnasa today is similar to the manna. That Hashem, for the tzaddikim, for the righteous, Hashem has that Eine Hashem el Yereo, the pasuk says. Hashem's eyes are for those who fear Him, or revere Him. There's a separate, relationship, a unique, inimitable relationship HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with the righteous, with those who fear Him, with those who serve Him, with those who are mekabel upon themselves, the El Teira and the El Mitzvahs, which really establishes somebody to be justifiably called a tzaddik, the righteous yid, someone who accepts upon himself the yoke of Torah, the learning Torah, and the yoke of mitzvahs, and is scrupulous in his learning in learning Hashem's Torah and doing Hashem's mitzvahs, and conducts himself the way Hashem wants him to conduct himself. Important to note, because not always, many times we believe in certain ways that we establish, as from a yidden for that matter, the famous expression that sometimes if Hashem, there's certain yidden, they're so fafrumt and they're so into their own style of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would come over to them and say, you're doing it a little bit different than what I had in mind. And the Yid would tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, what do you know about Avodah? What do you know about El Teir and El Mitzvahs? No, it's about Avodas Hashem. It's a submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do this which Hashem says in exactly the fashion and manner and style the way Hashem wants us to serve Him. Yeah, it's learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, but even we learn Rambam and Chasdeios, we realize there's much more to it. Instead, there's no substitute to actually learning Torah and toiling in Torah and doing mitzvahs scrupulously, but there's much more to it, which involves in our Avodas Hashem, the 24-hour package. And we know it is again as human beings, machshava, dibur ma'aseh, taras machshava. These are millisecond decisions which ultimately establish someone to be called a true tzaddik or a tzaddik bala'ir type of tzaddik. Not chas v'shalom negating, but these are terminologies where we are not allowed to just look at them so cheap. A tzaddik is somebody who is a Eved Hashem, a real Eved Hashem, that he comes clean after 24 hours in his service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then we have on top of that the explanation of Al-Tereb in Tanya, what a tzaddik, and on top of that, that a tzaddik according to Tanya is a total different phenomenon. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of his unique relationship with the tzaddikim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides for the tzaddikim in a way of man, which means they don't have to go through the regular channels that most of us have to go through in order to receive their parnasa. There is in one of the firmaments, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's Rechaim, there's even the millstones and the grinders, and they're already grinding. It's not HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving them the kernels, you figure it out how to bring the bread to your table. No, Hashem is grinding it for them, and Hashem is establishing it for them in order to make it so accessible and so beneficial and appreciable for them in order to move on with their Avodas Hashem. So this is the unique Eine Hashem el Yereo, which is manifest through this these grinders which stand in this rakia called shchakim in order to provide to the tzaddikim their sustenance. And again, thus the word man, similar to the way the man was in the desert, that it was something which was just provided for them and Yidden to learn Torah. For that matter, the Gemara says they had the full concentration on Torah and with the Rebbe Moshe Rabbeinu for 40 years because they didn't have any distractions. And that's the unique type of relationship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for the righteous. He establishes their parnasa in this very fashion. Now, does it mean that all tzaddikim have it like a kind of a glorified, comfortable, expansive life? No, not at all. It's meaningful. It's meaningless to them. They truly live in a higher plane. It's just Hashem provides them whatever they truly need. And if they're leaders in communities, they need more in order to provide more. Hashem will give it to them. But they're just in expansiveness in their physical life and physical pleasures. It truly means nothing for them. Not only the Elam Haba, the Elam Hazeh, all that. No, it's much beyond that. It's truly insignificant for a tzaddik, any extra delight and pleasure in Elam Hazeh. For real, if we can understand it or not. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for what they need to continue their unique Avodah Tzaddikim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides for them. And this is what it means. That is what's going on. Why don't you check out what's going on? One of the Rikim, the firmament, yeah, it's called Shchakim. And in that Shchakim, Shebayre Chaim, Eimdes V'Techanas Man Tzaddikim. There are all these grinders which establishes this man for Tzaddikim. Then there is another Rukiya, which is called Zvul. And we're going to Bez Hashem learn. We're going to go on with the Bez Hashem next week, but I want to just utilize the time over here. And again, not to lose focus. The Alter Rebbe is going to show you what does it mean, l'klali l'prate, as we said, the general creation and the detailed, which exists within every single creation. And in this case, the Rakia, Mihirakia, shall it be the firmaments? No, there's 7, and in each one of the 7 there's a whole world, and there's an established. There is an established ongoing procedures in every single world which would ultimately contribute to the benefit of what goes on in this very planet. If it's tzaddikim, and it's going to say later, the Zvul Shebei Yerushalayim, Beis Hamikdash, Mizbeach, the Eitzri, the storage of the snow, hail. Bez Hashem will pick up on this next week. But just to utilize the final moments of today's class, let's just see the Haggah. Because the Haggah is very interesting. He says, the Alter Rebbe says not only that the letter, because they're part of the Aleph Beis, as such, they carry that energy which provides and vivifies and vitalizes every created being, but because of that, this is the reason why the distinct image of that very letter. You look at the Aleph Beis, you see every single one of the Aleph Beis. There's none of them which are even. Yeah, there are certain ones which appear like others, the Beis and the Chaf as an example, but nonetheless, there's precision in the Beis that it has that bottom, the back of the bottom different than the back of the Chaf. And if it's the Nun, and the Langen Nun, known as the Nun Sofit or the Mem, every letter, because it carries a unique and distinct energy, different than the other letter, and therefore, hence the image is different, also the physical image of that letter. And this is what Alter Rebbe writes in the Haggah. Because every single letter of the 22 letters of the Torah has another energy which is unique and distinct and different than the other, and again a detailed and distinct kayach energy which is not drawn, it doesn't come about in another letter. Lekach, as such, gam tmunosam biksav, its image in its writing, which means in the actual image of the letter. Kol ois hi bitmuna miyuchedes pratis hamoire al tziram shocha veizgalus ha'er v'hachayis v'hakayach haniglo v'nimshach ba'ezu eicho nimshach v'nizgal lemideisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu ritzayni v'chachmasei. And meaning to say that every letter, that particular image that the letter carries, the letter is presented biksav, another way it's written. When we speak about the way it's written, obviously there's different ways. Even the same chabez eisi sateda are written. For example, we know that there's the script, the way we write a letter, for example, but that's not the original image of the letter. There's similarities. If you look at the test, it looks so different and distinct the way it's presented in the Torah, for example. And it's known to us as Ksav Ashuris, but nonetheless, there are similarities. Every one of the letters is you can connect and draw a similarity from the way it is in the Torah. But nonetheless, we're not talking about the way the letters, the way we know it. For example, we write a letter, when we say a letter, is the way it comes up, right? The first page of the Siddur. The way it comes up in the Sefer Torah, for example. This is the letters, this is the image what the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here. And we could definitely see the distinction and the unique character of every single letter in the way it comes up biksav, another way it is written. So the Alter Rebbe says it's not just like that, because we had to find a distinction between one letter and another that should end up being 22. No. The test looks like the test because a test carries a certain energy, which comes about exactly with a maximum precision, the way the test comes up in the image of the Ksav Ashuris, in other words, the test the way we know it. The exact way it comes from the right side to the left side, and that little piece on top, and so to the Aleph. The Aleph is the Yud on top, the Yud on the bottom, that connecting Vav, if you will. That is the Aleph, and the Aleph looks the way it is because the Aleph carries a certain energy, and so uniquely to that Aleph, therefore it is written in the it comes biksav, which means the image of the Aleph looks precisely like that Aleph, all based on the unique and important energy that the Aleph carries, and carries through into redemption, into creation. And where does it come from? As we said before, and we learned in Perek Yud and in Perek Yud Aleph, that it's coming from the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, exactly the way it is by man. You talk what you understand, what you appreciate, you put it in words. If it's an intellectual presentation, an intellectual concept that you present, it's words which will ultimately be the garments, meaning to say, to take that concept and put it into structure. If it's structure of machshava, aisis machshava, like we spoke about the other day, people think even in languages. Or aisis hadibur, you have a presentation in which you spoke out, you uttered, you explained the concept. So these words are ultimately this which brings out the seichel, brings that seichel, an intellectual concept, into a structured with a structured presentation. And so too, words bring out the inner workings when of man in association with his midas, his emotions. If a person, for example, is aroused with a midah, with a character of chesed, with an emotion of chesed, of kindness, but the other party doesn't yet feel the kindness till you execute that kindness. How do you execute the kindness? So you have a pattern, a machshava, aisis, a machshava, and then it comes into words. You tell the other party, come in, have this meal, or take this money, buy this, and buy your food for today, buy food for the week. Here's a place to lodge, here's a place to rest. When you're emoting the other party, sometimes you can sense that somebody is emoting with you, for you, but nonetheless there's no actual benefit on the ground. Again, we're just recapping what we spoke in the message of Yud and Yud Aleph, the Asara Mamoris over the Asara Dvarim. It's only the words bring about really what goes on. It's able to reveal and to bring what goes on within the inner workings of the human being into expression, into manifestation. I'm aroused with kindness, I use the words, and to execute this kindness. So the words are really coming from, they're a revelation, they're a manifestation of the inner workings, if it's intellectual inner workings, or which is known the Chachma Bina Das, or it's my midas, or it's my emotions. If it's kindness, compassion, and any other of the emotions which exist within the human being. So the aisis come, they stem from, and they bring about to actualization, to realization, all the midas and the chokhmah bina das which exists within the human being. So to lahavdil, or like we said many times, the reason why we say mipsari echzelaka, even though in essence it's the opposite, it's so true because it's on high. Therefore, I can experience it b'mipsari from my flesh, within my system. But for whatever reason, obvious reasons, we first are able to tune in and to appreciate the way things are by us. And then through that, echzelaka, even though obviously it's the reverse, it's because it's on high, therefore it manifests in that very fashion below. But we appreciate things below, and then we could reflect on the way it is on high. Mipsari echzelaka. So the same thing is with HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahavdil. These aisis didn't come out of nowhere, a new set of Asar Mamoris, divorced and completely independent of the Chacham Minadas and Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They are independent in a separate setup, but nonetheless they're so interconnected. Just like aisis by a human being, he brings out what goes on within his inner workings. If it's Chacham Minadas, or if it's his midas, so too. Now Rebbe concludes this ha'ara. Where does it come from? This is nizgala. These are aisis which are revealed and then they come to expression of revelation, manifestation from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's midas, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Chochmah, and that is the core inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that carries the real energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because Isis are a limited dimension within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we mentioned many times. There's the virtue of Isis, yet it takes all that energy, it limits it. What's so good that it limits it? Because it makes it real. You don't know what I'm emoting, if I'm aroused with chesed till I tell you, take this $100 or take this $1,000, buy yourself something to eat or pay your mortgage or whatever. See, the ICS are limiting. They don't carry that enormous energy which emotions carry. It limits, but it's a good thing that it limits, because that's the way you're able to convey that message of kindness to the other party, and the other party will be able to satiate it in full. He has something, or she has something to eat, or where to sleep, or the loan, and so on. But in the same token, it's a limiting force. The real energy exists within the inner workings of the human being, and lahavdil, because that's the way it is on high. And they were talking about the Chochmah Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So these Isis come and stem from, and they reveal that enormous energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Midas. So the way they would be drawn from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Midas, it comes down in every single us, in every single letter, in a particular manner, which is expressed, and it comes to rather a manifestation in the way that letter appears exactly in that image, in that form, because that form is intrinsic to the flow of energy from Hashem's midas, and ultimately would be the force which would create Elam Hazeh, with the entire Elam Hazeh, for that matter, all Elamis. Because Isis exists by the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malchus HaMalchus Kol Elamim. Again, these are ideas of which we spoke many times. But this is what Dr. Rebbe says in this Hagah, that it's just not just by chance or just to find distinction between one letter and another. Are the letters in that form and that fashion? But there is precision, because every letter carries enormous energy, and then the energy coming from Hashem's Chochmah Midas, and namely in this case he says the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they are transmitted into actual kaiches, which will ultimately create the world the way we know it, and as such the letter with that particular and precise image. Have a wonderful night.